Testing, testing, testing. Okay, we live? Okay, on your mark, get set, go. Good afternoon, y'all. This is the man in the black mask, and he's here to share another story with y'all, and it was tied to the Gregory Ramos case. And this is an update, of one of the co-conspirators, Dylan Ceglarek. He received 10 years probation for helping his mother, no, helping his friend Gail Ramos cover up his mom's death, that of Gail Clevenger. So, yes, man who helped Gregory Ramos cover up his mom's murder gets 10 years probation on papers, in addition for youthful offender status. So, in order for him, Mr. Ceglarek, to receive youthful offender status, he must complete them 10 years probation and its mandates. So, let me read this article. Hold this shit. Okay. Yeah. Man who helped Gregory Ramos cover up his mother's murder gets probation. Okay. Dylan Ceglarek stood in court Monday, apologized, and asked for forgiveness for his part in helping to cover up a mother's murder. Ceglarek, now 19, was one of two friends whom Gregory Ramos called to help him make it appear as if his house had been ransacked after Ramos strangled his mother, Gail Clevenger, to death. Ramos, who was 15 at the time, killed his mother on November 2nd, 2018, after the two argued over a school grade in their home at 35 Alicante Road in DeBarry. Ramos buried her body behind a church. Ceglarek on Monday was sentenced to a decade of probation. Ceglarek expressed remorse for his involvement, according to a Zoom broadcast of the hearing. Quote, I'm here not only to be sentenced and convicted, but to say what I want to say from the beginning. That is, I'm sorry, end quote, Ceglarek said. Quote, I'm sorry for my involvement in this case. I'm sorry for the loss of Miss Gail. I'm sorry for all the heartache that the family has gone through. I'm sorry for it all, end quote. Mr. Ramos was a student at University High School at the time of the killing, and also apologized at his sentencing last month in the same courtroom before Judge Sandra Upchurch. Okay. Now, speaking of Ramos, as part of a plea agreement, Ramos was adjudicated guilty to first-degree murder and other charges and received 45 years in prison, although he could possibly be freed in 25 years since he was a juvenile at the time of the murder. Meanwhile, Ramos was sentenced to a lifetime of probation. Lifetime on paper. Wow. Porras, now 20, also had a hearing on Monday, but it was continued. Assistant State Attorney Andrew Urbanath said he was working on a plea agreement in that case as well. So you can expect Mr. Porras to receive the same treatment as Mr. Ceglarek. Ceglarek and Porras, who is free on bond, were each charged with accessory after the fact to first-degree murder. They were not present when Mr. Ramos killed his mother. Ceglarek pleaded no contest to a reduced charge of accessory after the fact to second-degree murder, under the terms of the plea agreement reached by his defense attorney, Michael Nappy, and prosecutor Urbanath. Ceglarek has served 828 days in a Volusia County Branch jail, which is the amount of time required in the agreement, and for which he got credit. Time served, credited into the sentence of 828 days in jail where he was held without bail. Maybe he had bail, but for some reason it was revoked, mostly because of his mental state. Ceglarek was sentenced to 10 years probation. Adjudication was withheld, meaning that Ceglarek won't have a conviction on his record if he successfully completes probation. Hence, youthful offender, something that Mr. Ceglarek rightfully deserves, not just because of his mental state, but I guess you could say that Mr. Ramos used Mr. Ceglarek because he had mental problems. Now, there are a lot of people that will prey on others because of their mental state, and that shit needs to stop. So I'd say Mr. Ramos was a jackass on his part for ruining these boys' lives. And Had Mr. Ramos went to trial, both Ceglarek and Porras would have turned rats for the prosecution. So the boys are still government witnesses because they took plea deals and got less time. Well, Mr. Porras is going to take a deal. He's going to. But Ceglarek already took his. So he has nothing to lose unless he fucks up his probation. Ceglarek said in court that he knew he could not change the past. I know that it doesn't help with the pain, the loss, and the devastation that Miss Gale's family feels, Ceglarek said. I know all of that, and it weighs on me heavily. So I'm asking you for your forgiveness. And he was forgiven by Clevenger's sister, Ivy Wick, Gregory Ramos' legal guardian. She spoke next and told Ceglarek that had he not cooperated with law enforcement, her sister's body would not have been found that night. And that's a fact. Because I'm sure that Ceglarek, told the cops everything about Mr. Ramos and what he had done. And even though Ramos ordered Ceglarek and Porras to keep their mouths shut, they didn't and turn the state's evidence against Mr. Ramos. And now he has to serve every year in prison that his mom, Miss Gail Clevenger, lived. Mr. Ramos. A lot of people are thinking, fuck that dude. Quote, thank you for doing what was right, even though you knew that you would be in trouble, Miss Wick said. Miss Ivy Wick. She went on to encourage Ceglarek. Quote, and I know that you were feeling so low before this happened. You had contemplated suicide, Wick said. If you think that the world will be better off without you in it, you are wrong, unquote, Wick said. Quote, if you think you are undeserving of happiness, you are wrong. If you think you can't stand the overwhelming sense of loneliness and despair, hold on. Something better is about to happen, end quote. Prayers to Miss Ivy Wick, Gail's sister. That tells you right there that even though Ceglarek participated in Miss Wick's sister's murder, that being Gail, Miss Wick forgives him. Think about it. A lot of it wasn't Ceglarek's fault. It was Ramos's fault. Now, even though Ceglarek's actions were not excused, he's still a victim in some case. And that's probably what warranted the guilty plea, because he was probably taken advantage of. And I'm glad Mrs. Ceglarek took the deal. Otherwise, he'd have been fucked. He'd have been tried as an adult, and that youthful offender status would have been a no-no. That's why Miss Wick said something better is about to happen. Mrs. Ceglarek is being given a second chance to right those wrongs before he ends up in the big house. Miss Wick told Ceglarek that when he walked out of jail on Monday, he should do so knowing that Clevenger thought he was a worthy person. This is in response to when Mr. Ceglarek thought that the world would be a better place without him. And Ivy Wick is saying that Gail would think otherwise. She did not hate you, Wick said. She did not think you are a horrible person, and I don't think that either. Wick said she would give a copy of her statement to Clevenger's attorney to give to him. Quote, when you are feeling low or uncertain or bad about yourself, read this, Wick told Ceglarek. Quote, you are forgiven. You are deserving of better than what you had. You are smart. No, you are smart. You are capable. You have a future. You are not defined by your actions on November 2nd, 2018. You are defined by what you choose to do from this day forward. End quote. Correcto mundo. Now, as I said earlier, Mr. Ceglarek was a victim. Okay? He was manipulated by Mr. Gregory Ramos, this jackass who just whacked his mother over a D grade, and then had Mr. Ceglarek and Porras cover up his mom's death. But guess what? It backfired. Ramos didn't want his mother's body to be found. But guess what? It was found anyway, because his friends screamed on him. And in the end, you find out just who your friends are, as well as who aren't your friends. In the end, Ceglarek and Porras were not Mr. Ramos's friends. They were just pawns in a checker game, or chess, however you slice it. And I'm glad Mr. Ceglarek is getting a second chance. Okay? He deserves youthful offender status. If I was the judge, I would have done the same thing. Give this dude a second chance. Not Ramos, but Ceglarek. Because he was severely mentally ill, whatever his diagnosis is. But it was clear that that man needed help, Mr. Ceglarek. Which if he had gotten it, right, none of this wouldn't have happened. And had his mind had been just a little sounder, he would have tipped off the police and informed them of what Mr. Ramos had done, instead of taking himself and Forrest to the residence to help Mr. Ramos cover up his mom's death. And I gotta admit though, it's just a human tragedy on both sides, the sides of the suspects as well as the victims. Now, Mr. Ramos, he deserves to live each year in the prison as his mom lived. So that means he has to pay back what he took from his mother. He took a lot of stuff from his mother, but in addition, himself and his family. So he not only ruined his own life, he ruined so many other lives too. And now Ceglarek and Forrest, when they get youthful offender status, they're probably not going to give a fuck about Mr. Ramos, nor are they going to want his name mentioned around them. Capiche? I would feel the same way. That fuck ruined my life. So from here on out, I don't want nobody mentioning that piece of shit's name around me again. And of course, Ceglarek and Forrest are going to feel justified too, over the fact that they screamed on their buddy. I'm sure a lot of people was wishing that Ramos took it to trial and Mr. Ceglarek and Forrest turned government rats and testified against that piece of shit Ramos that whacked his mom and now has to serve about 50 years in jail. Because this takes me back to, the Pamela Smart case, when she whacked her husband with the help of her underage lover, Billy Flynn, who was 15 at the time. And all the boys, including Billy Flynn, testified against Pam. The girls, too, even though they weren't charged. They all testified against Pam. And Pam is still locked up to this day. And Sam Gravano testified against John Gotti and Frank Lacacho and put their asses away for life. Now, Gravano's living large and don't give a fuck about none of that shit. And Ceglarek and Forrest are not going to get too fucked about Ramos once they finish their sentence. Now, Ceglarek got a lot of challenges ahead of him, including that paper shit. Because let me tell you something. Once you get put on paper, whether it be parole or probation, that could be a setup to get you sent back to jail or prison. Which is why a lot of people would rather not do parole or probation, but just sit in a cage and max out their sentence, during which point they got to leave you the fuck alone. As long as you're not a lifer, you got nothing to lose. But I'm sure everything will be worked out with Mr. Ceglarek and his probation team, I'm sure they'll have everything put in place to ensure that he abides by the mandates, such as complete, drug and substance abuse testing, receive treatment as needed, take medication as prescribed, and not obtain drugs outside of that prescription, which would be a direct violation of his probation and get his youthful offender status revoked. And then he'll have to do 10 more years in jail, which would be about 12 years per se. And I'm sure he don't want that. He wants to do everything possible to better his life, stay drug-free, and only take drugs prescribed by the doctor. Because there are some people with mental illness that require drug treatment. Hopefully not him, but he's going to need a lot of therapy down the road. Mr. Ceglarek got his whole life ahead of him, and I'm really hoping that he don't blow this opportunity. Because he only got one chance to do the right thing. If he blows this, he has nothing. Okay? And I'm sure he don't want to spend another day in jail or prison because that will ensure that he commits suicide. Now, I think about Cleve Browder. He didn't commit suicide in jail, but he committed suicide out of jail because of the trauma that he suffered while he was locked up. And that could have easily happened to Mr. Ceglarek. But I'm glad he got treatment while he was locked up. And it was probably a good thing he was put on suicide watch, too, because the judge made repeated concerns over Mr. Ceglarek's mental state, and so did the lawyer. And that's what made it so challenging was his mental health. And I agree, too. And I pray that Ceglarek comes out of this a free man, right? That he does his probation, puts it behind him, and maybe things will work out better between the families of both the Ceglareks and the Cleveland Jolettes. Like I said, all lives are ruined Mr. Ceglarek knows that. He knows he deserves better. He's going to realize that when he gets older, that Mr. Ramos took advantage of him and Mr. Torres. And that's a fact. Why should he care about that dude? That dude fucked up his life. Okay? Mr. Ramos had behavioral problems. But let me tell you something. It was probably a good thing that some of you think that Mr. Ramos did not get youthful offender status because of the severity of his crimes, which if he did, he would have remained in custody until he was 21. And that would be until 2024. Okay? He would have served 6 years. But now he has to do a few more years, you know? About, let me say, um, about 39 years. Yeah, 39 plus 6. Yeah, 45. Bingo. So by the time he gets out, he's going to be an old ass man. He better pray that he gets out in 25 though. But as for this paper thing, Mr. Ramos will probably be on papers for the rest of his life. Now, who the hell wants that? That means you're in danger of receiving life in prison if you were to ever get lifetime parole or lifetime probation. Mr. Ramos is at risk because of it. And thankfully not Mrs. Segura nor Mr. Torres. Okay? They were complicit in some way. However, they are still victims because Mr. Ramos manipulated them into his sick game of his. Okay? Mr. Ramos was wicked. Okay? He was a wicked, miserable piece of shit who did not have to kill his mother over a D grade. And a lot of you wish that Mr. Ceglarek and Mr. Torres alerted the police right away after Mr. Ramos contacted them, during at which point Ceglarek and Torres would have never been charged, but they would have been certified as witnesses, government witnesses. And if Mr. Ramos went to trial, which thankfully he didn't, Ceglarek and Torres would have had to testify against Ramos, and that would have been a big humiliation, a big slam dunk for the prosecution, and a slam dunk for the defense on behalf of Mr. Ceglarek and Torres. So it was still a slam dunk, you know, it was still a slam dunk on both sides, let me tell you. But I urge all of you to pray for not only Mr. Ramos, but Mr. Ceglarek and Mr. Torres, because all lives will change forever because of this. Okay? Their lives will never be the same. The lives of both the suspects and the victims are permanently damaged, since an innocent woman died so horribly and needlessly and wickedly. And Greg Ramos, he's definitely going to need some prayers down the road. But each year he spends in that jail, you best pray that he don't become fresh meat for the big inmates who are going to be meaner, crazier, and more violent than him, as they will tear him a new ass up in there and will probably smoke him without a second thought. Because people get killed in prison, and they don't care how crazy or how bad you are or how good you are. Okay? If they want you, they will come after you head on, and you will crash and burn. Okay? So, thank you all for listening to this story. And don't forget to like and subscribe and drop a question underneath the screen and tell me what you think about this bizarre case. Not just of Mr. Ramos, but of Mr. Ceglarek and Mr. Torres. You know, because again, this is just a human tragedy in every sense of the word. You know? So like, subscribe, question underneath the screen. Okay? The man in the black mask would love to share his thoughts with you, as you have all done in the past. Okay, and I thank you for that. Good luck, be well, and have a good day. Thank you.